We are back. We have committee. Would anyone mind if we just told Jen Carby not to come in this afternoon to go through the biomarker bill, since it's an S bill and we aren't gonna do it this year? You can tell Jen she's free to go, which means we have H34. And so Rick, come on up, and this is an H bill.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are
And it
you?
is a nice.
Good.
Good.
Alrighty, thank you.
I'm so glad to hear.
Yes, Rick Sagel, Office of Legislative Counsel. So H34, which is coming up here in a second, is a workforce bill. And I'm going to walk through most of the language does not really apply to your committee. However, I'm going to walk through the bill just to give you a regular reference of what it's doing. And then we have Pat Sitterton here from JFO and Kirby drafted actually the language that you all will want to probably talk about the most. He's across the hall. He will be
Doing
here.
the ed bill, I bet.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on there.
I know.
I
We're
saw
supposed
it
to
on
get
Gray's
the ed
Pocket.
bill out
I
today.
left it
So
in.
Ouch.
If John's in the hot seat, I don't want to be in the room.
probably in the hot. No, actually, yeah, I don't know who's in the hot seat over there.
So, H34, this came out of Senate Economic Development, and couple things. There's a purpose and intent statement. I won't read that because it's just plain English of what's going on here. Section 2 is amending Title 32, Section 5811. This is one that Kirby inserted. So Section 2 begins the process of exempting military retirement income from state taxes. There's a bill that you have a conference on, S51, that takes a different approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar.
Is this in the House bill, or is this added by Senate Economic Development?
This was added by Senate Economic Development. H51 is the House bill. And
Yeah.
I've spoken to Pro Tem. At some point, the two need to come together, at least in conference.
Yeah, that would be because if that's in there.
Yeah.
That's gonna send it back to Ways and Means, and it's the Ways and Means version that's in conference.
And the Ways and Means version is different. There are new
Yeah.
taxes here. And I can give you the 5-minute summary
Okay,
as to what the differences are
but
when you're ready.
Ways and Means is gonna have to prove,
Ways and Means is going to have to look at
Either
it.
way.
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
I suspect, depending upon what we do with H51, the question is whether or not the monies are the same. This requires 3.9 million, and Ways and Means dealt with it is they took 2.4 million and applied it to this, and they took, I think, 1 point something million and applied it to some new tax benefits that's contained in H51.
okay.
For veterans.
Mhm.
No,
So it's right.
That's the balance that'll get worked on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do want to say Pat is here. He can clarify.
okay.
I don't know those numbers.
I just am trying to not have this bill get lost, because it will then have to get sent back to Ways and Means when I think everybody knows what the balance is in the other bill.
Yeah.
So we might need to strike this section and send a note. Ways and Means, or I'll tell Ways and Means, but they know what it is.
They
Not
know
like
what it
it's
is, and
subject.
the best method to ensure that both are considered by the conference
Yeah.
committee, ideally simultaneously. It's the right way, I think the right way to do this.
So, continuing on section 2, I'm on page 3 of the bill, actually on page 4. The new language added to that section, and let me go back to the introductory language here. Taxable income means, in the case of an individual, federal adjusted gross income determined without regard to 26 USC 168K and decreased by the following items of income. So we're there, decreased by U.S. military retirement income and U.S. military survivor benefit income received by the surviving spouse or dependent of the deceased service member. So again, when you're in a conference, you'll see the other bill has, it's based on how much money you make. If you make over 125, between 125 and 175, you have,
Which is what we
That's
do
yours.
with social security and it's income linked.
right, that's the way they need to.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it that way, but that's the way they say. Section 3 is tying loose ends and ensuring that, the bill would exempt, military retirement income from, state taxable income. That's what section 3 does. Okay, section 4, this is the workforce, stuff that was worked on the House side. You probably remember, I bet you remember that last year, the General Assembly created a new Office of Workforce Strategy and Development. Does that ring a bell? What does not ring a bell? Well,
Sure. Yeah,
And I was on.
it's Sabina, yeah, Sabina Haskell is the executive director. Anyway, that office was created, and this is kind of meant to tie up loose ends. Because currently, the Commissioner of Labor and Statute has most of the duties of workforce training, education, and employment in the state. And the reason that the office was created was to give that new office some duties that the Commissioner of Labor currently has. So Section 540 in 10 VSA currently lays out the Commissioner of Labor as the leader of workforce in the state. But again, because we created this office last year, this was left unchanged last year, and we changed this year. There was a special oversight committee appointed over the summer that met, and I was on that committee as legislative counsel, and we met, I think, 8 times going over this language. And the Commissioner of Labor was a member. We had 2 members of the General Assembly as members, a member from the governor's office as a member of the committee. And came up with this language. So no fiscal impact here, but the language goes on to ensure that this new Office of Workforce Strategy and Development does have the ability to co-lead workforce education, employment, and training in the state. If you care, some of the reasons we have to do this way is because federal law requires the Commissioner of Labor to be the contact person, the liaison for a lot of the federal workforce requirements or WIOA. WIOA is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Again, not relevant to your committee, but to give you some background of why we're doing this. So that's what section 4 is doing. It is just amending language to ensure that the 2 different positions have co-leadership abilities in the state. We do have some reporting added by the new executive director of Office of Workforce Strategy and Development. That is on page 11, subsection E. And then we have section 5, which kind of goes back to the military retirement piece. I don't believe this is in the Ways and Means version of the bill, page 51, is that ACCD would work with the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development to issue a report to House Commerce and Senate Economic Development that provides a summary of the marketing efforts being utilized by the agency and, if applicable, other state agencies or departments to recruit military personnel to fulfill the workforce needs of the state. The Senate committee really thought this was a workforce initiative. Removing
If
the
we
retirement.
don't succeed in attracting them, does the provision of not accepting their pay, their retirement pay go away?
No.
I didn't think so.
This is meant, I think that, and I may let Senator Brock speak for it, but this was meant to really ensure that work is being done to recruit people here, military veterans here, to fill workforce needs in addition to the retirement
But
benefits.
it's being sold as a workforce development tool that military people won't come here because we don't accept their retirement payment. So if we get it respect for their service, then we get into what about fire and police? So, if we aren't attracting workforce here, it begs the question as to why we're going in. If they aren't coming, or would it be here anyway? That's just my position.
I think the point, and we had fairly extensive discussions of this in economic development, is this is a workforce development tool, and it's designed to take a look at those positions of the type that we have open and the number we have open, to match them to the recruitment effort of veterans who have the skills, specific skills that we need in our workforce. This last provision was simply added as a means of accountability to ensure that we were getting what we did.
Well, that's what
Now-
I'm asking.
What we have as at least a partial basis for thinking that this is an effective tool are a couple things. One, we are the only one of two states in the United States that does not have a robust system in which there is a retirement income exclusion for veterans. All of our fellow states in New England, as well as New York and related states, have this benefit for, in effect, full exemption, or in the case of New Hampshire, no income tax at all. So Vermont is an outlier.
Well, we did have one on property tax that went in, these all went in. I checked the late 40s, early 50s,
Mhm.
which was a good political move because the bill didn't come in for 20 years.
Mhm. Well, the point is,
But we did have,
Yeah.
it's not that we didn't respect our veterans.
well, we don't have it now, and we haven't had it
Well,
in
we've
recent
had,
years
we
where
have had
other
60,
states,
we still have it.
well, but other states, in terms of the income exemption, do have it. And Vermont is an outlier in which it doesn't. And the research that we did in preparation for the bill, one of the things we heard over and over again from recruitment people, from people who engaged in transition throughout other states, is that when people heard what Vermont had for this, Vermont got dropped and folks moved on.
So that's all I'm asking. Are we going to track if
Yes,
we do this? Are we, if we don't succeed in attracting a significant number of retired personnel, are we going to reconsider?
well, I think that is dependent upon what future legislature does, but the point is to give them the information on which to act.
Yes,
We can't bind a future legislature in terms of what it does. What I do have to say, though, or did note during the research we did on this, compared to the two approaches, is South Carolina, somewhat similar situation, and they did adopt something like that several years ago, and they did a REMI study, the same study that we used to determine the validity of things like the employment growth incentives, to measure, did we get what we thought we would get, and in other words, was it worth it? And we did find that they did a study similar to the one that we would propose here. We simply didn't have the time to do it, one, and two, we didn't have the money to do the REMI study. Just take some time. We have the tools to be able to do the study because we in fact used that same methodology. South Carolina did the study, and they found that with a minimal number, it was successful and it did produce a result. It produced a result, not just in the veterans, but also in the dependents of the veterans, who also typically come with them and are part of the transition process. The one thing that is really striking is the match between some of the skills that these veterans have, and especially some of the skills that the spouses have, such as teachers and nurses, were two of the most common professions that were added. And they did add to the benefit offset. And they did so relatively quickly. Now, will this happen for us? We don't know. You know, revenue studies are, they're studies, and we haven't done it. Two, we're looking at what another state, similar situation, has done, and we see that there is success. So it tells us that it makes sense.
North Carolina, I think, has some good sized military bases.
South Carolina?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. Mhm.
We don't.
So there are differences, no
That's a
question.
difference. Okay, let's move on.
So the ACD report would be until, just so you all know, January 1, 2029. It's meant to be kind of what is happening. Is this, are we actually recruiting veterans to come here based on this new incentive to move here? It would stop on January 1, 2029. And then we get to the effective dates. basically the most unique one is those taxable changes. It would be retroactive to January 1, 2025. So tax year 2025 would be eligible for the exemption. Everything else is July 1st, 2025.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, Dr. Patrick,
Sure.
I better make some decisions.
Yeah. I am Patrick Dixon with the Joint Fiscal Office, and I guess, Madam Chair, I would ask where you would like me to start. I know there are a few different things that you've been talking about, the House bill that's coming and it has a conference. I have a memo on this particular proposal, which I believe many of you have seen at some point during the session. Or if
I haven't, I think just present what you've got on the numbers here. To me, the decision and the profit of the folks that are on is we already have a conference committee with one version of the military exemption in there. I think everybody on there knows what the other version is. If we pass this bill out with the military exemption, it's going to get sent to Ways and Means, which means it's probably not going. I mean, they've already had a similar bill and they've come up with the bill that's in conference, our caregiver bill. So either you can't have the same thing riding in two bills. So if we send this back to them, it's probably going to sit there. It may not make the end of the session. We strip it out, then the rest of the bill will go. And the conference committee, Randy, you're on it, right? So we know it'll get presented.
We know it'll get presented, but we know also, Ways and Means should be aware of this. The Pro Tem was made aware of this potential conflict before either of these
Yeah.
bills was dealt by anybody, and he indicated that, they could look at coordinating this so that we did this once rather than twice.
Okay, yeah.
We're aware of the
You
potential
have-
conflict, and he is aware of the potential conflict.
To your point, Madam Chair, if I understand, sorry, I'm asking Rick, even though he just left the chair, in the committee of conference with S51 with its currently construct, we wouldn't be bound based on germaneness or the confines of the bills to not gravitate towards this should that committee want to. That wouldn't be a defective report.
No, I mean, you can, if the committee wants to add in language that was not, it would be strange, to consider language that was not.
It's the ballpark. Defense.
So I mean, it's Kirby's bill, I'm not familiar with what the Senate, is proposing to that bill.
On that bill, we
Yeah.
had a caregiver's tax credit, which they completely stripped
Okay.
and put all the governor's
Okay.
proposed that were in the budget on it,
Yeah.
plus,
So there's not,
their version of the military pension. I think if there's a military pension in there,
There is a pension for people who receive relatively low amounts of pension who are not retirees. And that's something that's new in H51 from what we talked
Yeah.
about previously.
so
you could add in language.
we can,
So my point being, I support that path. I fully support taking on this important topic and all those things, but I'd also be okay with pulling this from this bill, knowing that it's going to be discussed in S51. It can still be relevant to that discussion. So
that's the numbers.
Yeah, sure. So why don't I do this? I will refresh you all on what this particular proposal costs. Then we can shift to the bill that you're receiving from the House, and I will point out the differences, the S51, and the
Okay,
differences in the two proposals. And then we can end by, I'll tell you sort of how that squares away with the budget construct and what they've made accommodations for.
all right,
So, as I think was mentioned, we're estimating in consensus with the tax department that this would result in about $3.9 million in tax expenditure on an annual basis. So that's as you received it from the GovRec. So next, why don't we skip over to, this is the fiscal note. I sent it to Charlotte really not that long ago, so I don't know if she sent it, but she's quick. But this is jumping down onto the third page where you have the description of what they did with regards to military retirees, and then also this additional piece of veterans.
Oh, wait. Let me stop you. I guess it's not there. There is something under your name that's related to it.
Yep, that was the document I had on just a moment ago.
Great.
Okay, sorry.
But you can also find-
watch the screen.
Yeah. So the concept is not super complicated. Essentially, they set income bounds. They made it sort of means tested based on the same income thresholds that exist in statute for the child tax credit. And actually the same income thresholds that this committee passed the unpaid caregiver credit out with. So it's full exemption amount up to 125,000, pays that over the next 50,000, so that by the time you have the AGI of 175,000, you're not eligible to exempt any of that income. So that's the difference. One is all of it, the other has those income bounds. The difference is cost is for the full, it's 3.9. And for the income bound one, it's $2.5 million on an annual basis. So so then what the House essentially had was the budget had room for $13.5 million in all of the tax credits and exemption changes. So to basically come back up to that amount, they came up with a veteran tax credit. So remember, there is that distinction between what a retiree is and what a veteran is. There are a lot more veterans in Vermont than there are retirees. There's about 34,000 veterans. There's about 3,900 retirees, about 3,600 of which are receiving pension benefits. So the difference they made up through this credit, which has a very low income bound. So if you're at $25,000 in household income or below, you can receive a fully refundable credit worth $250. And then over the next $5,000 of income, that again, it's phased out. So if you're above 30,000, you're no longer eligible.
This is in the bill that's presently come.
This is in the conference
It's
bill.
never come here, okay.
Yeah, as you have never seen this
Okay.
proposal before. And so this is what's in conference, and what I'll just preemptively sort of answer a question that I've gotten a lot in going through this. So it's $25,000 or below an AGI. A lot of these folks are not going to be required to file taxes. However, I always say this not necessarily in the context of this particular credit, but in general, you should always file your taxes because you might have been withheld, you may be eligible for
You're
credits.
gonna get $250, then that should be living in a motel.
So within, coming back to I'm scrolling up fast just because there's a call out box.
Okay.
There's 13.5 matches with the accommodation that was made in the budget for the amount of additional tax expenditures this year. So to fit sort of, we always talk about box, to fit within the box, you still need to have them cumulatively equal that amount. So in a sense, if you were to go to the full, assuming you accept all of these, which I know is not foregone because it's in conference.
They took out our thing.
Yes, they did.
Essentially, the sum total of the new tax expenditures would have to live within that. So for purely hypothesis sake, if you were to leave everything else as is, but fully exempt the military, you'd be 1.4 of that veterans credit over what's sort of fits within the budget box.
But the new concept here, because EITC, their expansions of existing. But the new credit is for veterans.
For veterans.
Retirees are 20-year veterans. Not necessarily, generally not the wounded warriors you see on TV. So this would give all veterans something, even if they just served in Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan. And
All up to $25,000.
yes,
So
so those guys living Yeah, that we just put out in motels, yeah. Yeah.
Just a question,
Yeah.
listen to what you said. So disability payments right now, somebody that leaves the service without a military retirement, but with a disability payment. Is that income taxable under Vermont law?
That question I don't know the answer to. What this proposal is contemplating is purely just the pension benefits.
Pension benefit,
Yeah.
yeah.
I would bet it would be treated like SSI.
Or it may be considered. Might be just a pension benefit based on the number of the,
On disability,
yeah,
disability.
Yeah.
It's disability discharge, that's very possible.
yeah,
Okay.
I think you know for
You
sure.
have a military pension?
I know.
You don't, do you, Randy, or
No.
Senator Brock?
That's a good question.
Maybe.
Does this include guard members?
Again, so there's basically two types of retiree. There's the active duty retirees, and they can start receiving their benefits immediately upon retirement from the military. But then there's the reservists. And they have to wait till they're 60 to start claiming the benefits. So you might have heard me mention earlier, there's 3,900 retirees, but 3,600 of them are receiving benefits. Those are gonna be those reservists who haven't hit the age requirement yet to start receiving.
Right, retired, but
It was-
no benefit.
Yeah.
Right.
To
And
be
the
in
target here-
service was a very lucrative thing for a weekend, a month, and I think it's a week or 2 weeks. You got a pension. I went to school with several state employees who were doing that. And then we started sending the reservists to Iraq and Afghanistan, and it became much less desirable. And we've been having trouble filling the reserves since then.
But their pensions are prorated based on how much time they're active.
So this is one of the things that General Knight
Yeah, but it's
testified
still
on.
not
at length, that
Without risk.
there are real issues in terms of recruitment, which is one of the things that he was concerned about. The concern of a lot of others, though, was the whole issue of building the workforce as a workforce development tool. Since we are critically short of housing, we're also critically short of competent people who could do certain kinds of tasks. And so part of the research that we did was take a look at what some of those tasks were that we're desperately short of, and what military retirees from the active services, typically late 30s, early 40s, who have 20 more years of work available, what would they bring to the party that we had and that we needed? And we found a substantial number of batches.
And we are going to be monitoring if this in fact works.
So we were talking about H34 and now we're talking about S51. Did we make a decision on what we're going to do with H34? Do we need to do that today or what's your plan?
Age 35.
That's
Like most of you, this is my first walkthrough on any of these.
Because I think Senator Chittenden suggested maybe just taking out this out of
We can just take the military
military's
out,
keep the report in.
do the rest of the bill.
Yeah.
And because if we don't, then this bill is going back to Ways and Means and its chance of passage this year gets iffier. It's
Either
Ways and
way, we're
Means,
probably
they're
gonna have to
be-
deal with it in a conference committee.
Yeah, it's being dealt with in the conference committee.
S51 will already be, it's already in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That first meeting was just scheduled for next Wednesday. Like
Mhm.
3 minutes ago.
So I'm not seeing the need of keeping it in H34 if it's being fleshed out in the conference committee of this.
If that's the case, but one of the things that I want to do before saying absolutely yes to this is have another conference with Pro Tem to see precisely what he did and whether or not he's had any conversations with pros on this issue based on our previous discussions. Meeting, doesn't say you can't vote it out one way or the other on
We can
Tuesday.
Put this off pending.
Yeah.
So we will put this on for vote on Tuesday, just keep piling them in. And, we will be, my intention is we're on the floor at 10. I could try scheduling us at 11:30. which means we will probably end up doing what we're doing now, being late. If I schedule us for one, that means that we can do conference committees in the morning, either before the 10 o'clock floor or after, because you only have 6 people on a conference committee to schedule. And we can, do our work here and then do conferences after 3. I'll try and get us out by 3 in the afternoon. Rick, does that work? Yeah, okay, we know about the best laid plans, but, that will be my plan. We'll go from 1 to 3 most days and knock out the bills as they come to us. Other than that biomarker, which is an S bill, most of what we're going to get will be fees, it will be like the ag bill.
We're gonna do some pot next week.
That's right. That will probably take a whole afternoon. We have the cannabis bill coming to us, which has basically a couple fees. It's not,
It's a whole new fee schedule.
Yeah.
The Governor Rogers might want to speak to it.
I'm not sure that it would be in the best interest of the lieutenant governor.
I don't think it's just that appropriate for him.
I don't either.
That's running on bills.
It was down to econ development.
I know, it just,
Got reported on
I
it.
mean, he has to,
Yeah, he's a
Preside.
presiding officer.
Yeah.
And he also throws the. There are other,
Okay, we're gonna do some pot next week.
you just like saying that.
You just
Oh my
like
gosh.
nobody brings
You're like a high
samples.
schooler.
All right.
Okay, good
Fantastic.
timing, Kirby. We're done. Oh, but I got assignments for you for next week.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is blah, blah.